Chapter 15. Father Vincent. Kumalo returned to Mrs. Litabe's tired and unhappy. The two women were silent, and he had no desire to play with the small child. He withdrew into his room to rest before going to the mission house, but there was a knock at the door, and there stood the young white man.
Umfundisi,
said the young man, about this lawyer. I think you must have a lawyer, not because the truth must not be told, but because I do not trust your brother. You can see what is in his mind. His plan is to deny that his son and the third man were with your son. A lawyer would know whether that will make matters worse or not. And Absalom says that he fired the gun because he was afraid, with no intention of killing the white man. It needs a lawyer to make the court believe that is true. Yes, I see that. Do you know of any lawyer, of your church maybe? No, sir, I do not. But Father Vincent will know. So they walked to the mission house. I think I could get a good man to take the case, said Father Vincent. We are agreed that it is to be the truth and nothing but the truth, and that the defense will be that the shot was fired in fear and not to kill. And what about the marriage? Asked the young man. I shall ask him about that also. I would gladly marry them if it can be arranged. Father Vincent put his hand on the old man's arm. Be of good courage, he said. Whatever happens, your son will be severely punished, but if his defense is accepted, it will not be the extreme punishment. When the young man had gone, Kumalo said to the English priest, You can understand this has been a sad journey. At first, it was a search, and I was anxious. But as the search went on, step by step, so did the anxiety turn to fear, and this fear grew deeper step by step. But it was here, when we heard of the murder, that my fear grew into something too great to bear. After a pause, he continued, Nsimango said to me, Why fear this one thing in a city where there are thousands and thousands of people? That comforted me, and it did not comfort me. And even now, I can hardly believe that this thing, which happens one time in 1,000, has happened to me. Sometimes, for a moment or two, I can believe that I shall wake and find it has not happened. But it is only for a moment or two. To think, said Kumalo, that my wife and I lived out our lives there in Ndotsheni, not knowing that this thing was coming step by step. There is a man sleeping there in the grass, and over him is gathering the greatest storm of all his days, bringing death and destruction. People hurry home past him, to places safe from danger, and whether they do not see him there in the grass, or whether they fear to stop even a moment, they do not wake him, they let him be. They were silent a long time. My friend, said Father Vincent, your anxiety turned to fear, and your fear turned to sorrow. But sorrow is better than fear. Fear is a journey, a terrible journey, but sorrow is at least an arriving. And where have I arrived? Asked Kumalo. When the storm threatens, a man is afraid for his house. But when the house is destroyed, there is something to do. About a storm, he can do nothing, but he can rebuild a house. At my age? Asked Kumalo. Look what has happened to the house that I built when I was young and strong. What kind of house shall I build now? No one can understand the ways of God, said Father Vincent. It seems that God has turned from me, said Kumalo. That may seem to happen,
But it does not happen. Never, never does it happen.
I am glad to hear you, said Kumalo quietly, but my son is now a stranger to me. I cannot touch him. I see no shame in him, no pity for those he has hurt. Tears come out of his eyes, but it seems that he cries only for himself. He who has made 2 children lose their father. Stop! Cried Father Vincent. Go and pray. Go and rest, and do not judge your son too quickly. Pray for Gertrude, and for her child, and for the girl that is to be your son's wife, and for the unborn child. Pray for your wife and all at Ndotsheni. Pray for the soul of him who was killed, and for the woman and children that have lost him. Pray for us at the mission house. Pray for your own rebuilding, and do not fear to pray for your son. I hear you, said Kumalo quietly, and give thanks where you can give thanks. He led the old man to the door of the mission. I shall pray for you, he said, night and day. That I shall do, and anything more that you ask. The next day, Kumalo went alone to see the girl who was with child by his son. The girl opened the door to him, and she smiled at him uncertainly, with something that was fear and something that was welcoming. Have you heard of your husband? He asked. The smile went from her face. I have not heard, she said. What I have to say is serious, he said. He is in prison. In prison? She said. He is in prison for the most terrible thing that a man can do. But the girl did not understand him. He has killed a white man. She cried out and put her hands over her face. And Kumalo himself could not continue, for the words were like knives, cutting into a wound that was still new and open. She sat down on a box and looked at the floor, and the tears started to run slowly down her cheeks. I do not wish to speak of it, my child. Can you read the white man's newspaper?
A little.
Then I shall leave it with you. I do not wish to speak of it anymore. I have come to speak with you of another matter. Do you wish to marry my son?
It is as the Umfundisi sees it.
Is it truly your wish to marry him? I must be certain. I do not wish to take you into my family if you are unwilling. At those words, she looked up eagerly.
I am willing, she said.
We live in a far place, he said. There are no streets and lights there. There is only me and my wife, and the place is very quiet. You are a Zulu?
Yes, Umfundisi.
Where are your parents?
My father left my mother. They quarreled, Umfundisi, because my mother was so often drunk.
So your father left, and he left you also? What did you do?
I left that house, and I lived in Sophia town.
Alone?
No, not alone.
With your first husband? He asked coldly. How many have there been? She laughed nervously.
Only 3,
she said. And what happened to the first?
He was caught by the police, Umfundisi.
And the second?
He was caught also.
And now the third is caught also. He stood up, and a wish to hurt her came into him. Yes, your third is caught also, but now it is for murder. Have you had a murderer before?
No, no, no,
she cried. And he, seeing her and her thin body, was ashamed for his cruelty. How old are you, my child?
I do not know,
she cried.
But I think I am 16.
And deep pity rose up in him. Tell me, do you truly wish to marry my son? She reached for his hands.
I wish it.
She said. And to go to a quiet and far-off place and be our daughter?
I wish it greatly.
She said. Have you clothes for the marriage?
I have some clothes, Umfundisi.
And you must not live here. I shall find you a place near me. Stay well then, my child.
Go well, Umfundisi.
He went out of the house, and she followed him to the little gate. When he turned back to look at her, she was smiling at him. He walked on like a man from whom a pain has lifted a little, not altogether, but a little. And he remembered too that Father Vincent had said, I shall pray night and day. At the corner he turned and, looking back, saw that the girl was still watching him. Mrs. Litebi, you have heard of this girl who is with child by my son. She wishes to marry my son. Then, whatever may happen, she will go with me to Ndotsheni and bear her child there in a clean and decent home.
You would like to bring her here first, Umfundisi?
Indeed, that would be a great kindness. Mother, I am grateful. Indeed, you are a mother to me.
Why else do we live?
She said.